everyone, to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We are in season 9 and here to talk about the Missouri basketball Tigers. Uh, there have been better circumstances that we've started a podcast. Um, Last week, we previewed the forthcoming games, and I think reasonably thought they could go 1-1.
Hmm.
I don't know that anybody foresaw what was coming, but we're going to talk about it. I'm your host, Sam Snelling. If you're watching us now live on YouTube, hello, welcome. Make sure that you're subscribed. You'll get notifications for when we go live on things like this. And with me, as always, Mr. Matthew J. Harris out of Indiana, supporting Missouri basketball in the Hoosier State, Hickman cross country. Matt, how are you?
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. That's that's it. I mean, really, I thought, coming out of yesterday and then going through some data during lunch today and going through film, I thought like maybe I'd get worked up, but like I think there was a sense that I had going into Sunday, right when I saw the starting lineups, how this was going to go, and it went kind of about how I thought it might go if there weren't some tweaks made. It didn't make it less infuriating like in the moment to watch it, but I think after, the horn and I sat down, I went through lineups and I went through play type data and all that stuff. You just kind of got the sense that it really couldn't go any other way given the choices that were made beforehand. And so I think, we can try and look at this as a discrete event, like what happened in this game in particular and like the game flow and everything, which I think maybe there's some merit to it, but realistically I think this is just part of a larger series and some larger themes that we've beaten to death like a poor haggard horse over the last 4 weeks. But it really felt like this was sort of the culmination or denouement of all of them. So we can talk about the specificity of each game, but I think really this felt like a week that I think we kind of hinted at was like this is going to be kind of that rubber meets road week for what their approach to this roster and this rotation is going to be. And the returns were not great. So we can work through that. But that's just where my head's at is you could kind of maybe see this coming and maybe there was some time to adjust and mitigate it. But nope, they leaned on some things that they had wanted to do all non-conference and they got some harsh lessons out of it. And so we can work from there, I guess.
Uh, yeah. So they jumped out to a lead against Notre Dame once they parked the jumbo lineup, and actually got a coherent lineup on the floor with guys who could score the basketball. Um, it's amazing to me at this point that we've had a 10 game sample, and you've had two guys who have been consistently good throughout this entire 10 game sample. It's Jacob Cruz and Mark Mitchell. Um, like why they're not starting Jacob Cruz at this point, and if we reach the start of SEC play, and I realize like look, it worked last year with with Caleb Grill not starting Caleb Grill, but you know what? You also had Tamar Bates, like another. You had a 40% 3 point shooter on the floor,
Yeah.
starting every basketball game last year with Tamar Bates. So yeah, you can bring Grill in off the bench. He's sort of like your flamethrower off the bench. It works that way. You've got to start like your with your best foot forward, and we have seen, and there is ample evidence at this point that this is not Missouri's best foot forward. Starting with three jumbo bigs, basically three guys who should be playing at the 4 or the 5, uh, and no shooting. Because Ant Robinson can't seem to get things going. The only guy in the court who might have a shot at making a 3-pointer. They've tried Sebastian Mack with that, and then the recent switch to Honor Boateng. Um, and again, like I like both of those guys, um, but they're not shooters. And you have a guy who has started the season like he could possibly be the best shooter uh, in the SEC, and Jacob Cruz. Maybe if we want to, who's the dude Dominguez from Texas A&M?
Mm-hmm.
Might make stake that claim also, but really an elite shooter. And the one thing that this team needs more than anything is space. You want to give space to Mark Mitchell. You want to give space to Ant Robinson. You want to give space to Honor Boateng. You want to give space, to, Sean Phillips. Nobody has any space, and they come out against Notre Dame and they fall behind. Put a coherent lineup on the floor, and suddenly they surge ahead. And then against Kansas, it was the dreaded jumbo lineup. Started slow in the first and second half. The middle eight, as a lot of football coaches refer to it, was a 23-3 run.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's beyond frustrating at this point because like we see it happening. There's enough data and enough video at this point. You should know. You should know that like this isn't working, and for all the things that and I've said this on the podcast before, but the thing that drives me the craziest about it is you have one of the best foremen in the country in Mark Mitchell. And Mark Mitchell is like, when he is playing the four, he is like final boss level good. Like he has been terrific this year.
It's been awesome.
He is playing more minutes. His efficiency has gone up. Like shooting around the rim, finishing around the rim, all of that is better. He has been awesome. And you're basically starting with him in a lineup where nobody is pulling defense away from the rim so he can operate. And it's like
the best thing I can tell you is when we look at the plus minuses for guys over the 3 games against high major foes, Minnesota, Notre Dame, and Kansas, Mark Mitchell has a minus 27 in 25-20 playing on the wing. That flips to plus 22 in 80 minutes at the 4. That's your answer right there. That's it right there. And then people will talk about, oh, well, we get, bigger at the 4. We have a rim anchor. We've got a guy who we can throw the ball into and punch the ball into and score around the rim. We've got a guy who can help us around the rim, rebounding and provide backline protection. When Sean Phillips plays the post against legitimate teams, minus 25 is Missouri's net rating with him on, is Missouri's scoring margin with him on the floor in 56 minutes. You put Luke Northweather, a guy who's apparently a soft stretch 5, can he stand up to the physicality? Missouri is plus 27 with Luke Northweather, who was billed as basically a walk-on in 47 minutes. That's it. I mean, playing Mark Mitchell at the 4 puts you in a 27-point hole. That's indefensible. There's nothing that I can say other than that. Show me what benefit, the net benefit of that is. You can talk about, it's creating these certain kinds of matchups. We like that it can be a 2-man game with the bigs. It's not. The results tell you you're 27 points worse against teams with a pulse by doing it.
mm-hmm.
And, we've rehashed some stuff, in past episodes. But to me, that's just what it comes down to, is you're putting your best player at a spot that he doesn't normally play, and in the 25 minutes you've done it, you're underwater by 27 points.
And so I would say, like, on the Notre Dame side, I think you can you can come away from that and say like, look, there are some positives that you can glean from that. We didn't play that well. It was basically a Mark and Jacob show offensively, uh, and it basically took a guy, banging in a 26-footer
to win.
to win. So okay, like winning on the road is hard. Blah blah blah. All that is fine. But like coming into the Kansas game, and you know that look, this is not a vintage Bill Self KU team. They
Talent
are,
wise.
yeah, talent wise, they're good. Like KU is good, but they're not elite. And Darren Peterson makes them a threat to maybe be a dark horse for a Final Four appearance. But that's even to me with the roster that they have is a stretch. Like he has to be All America level good for them to have a shot at a Final Four. They're a tournament team. They're probably like a maybe a 6 seed. That's what they look like when I've watched them this year. And to go into that game and essentially like I thought Missouri played hard. I thought defensively they were really you know pretty good, especially in the first half. The little run happened. Some weird things kind of went against them, and the at the end of the first half that I don't necessarily think are things that you're just like, oh well, that's avoidable. Like sometimes the ball just sort of bounces that way, and uh, you know that's what happened. But then to come out in the beginning of the second half with a lineup that that doesn't work, again, like one of the few guys who have helped you score points in the first half
He's not out of position.
are they're on the bench, and you're basically starting over. And then what happens in 11-1 start to the second half, and then and now you're buried, and it's just like
This is the thing, though. Like, we can talk about what they did at Notre Dame, and they fought hard, and they played the Jumbos, and they were a -3 to start the game. They went back to the Jumbo lineup again to start the second half, and -5, -8, and a 5-point road loss because you played two lineups that didn't give you anything, and then you get to a lineup where you start playing Cruz and Mitchell together in the middle of the first half. You start ramping up the ball pressure, and you have Phillips on the floor, but he's really just a backline anchor with the press. He's not out there creating deflections or out there really, changing the shape and changing and applying pressure. He's just sort of there to, mind the store. You go on a run. You put Javon Porter in it, starts the run at the 4 there. Then they bring Mitchell back in, and I'm looking at it right here. They go Cruz, Mitchell, Phillips from 10:24 all the
this
way
is
to
the
about
Notre Dame
game, all the way to 6:51, and they outscore them by 7 points. They open the lead up right there, tied 17-17, and they open it up to 28-21. Then they get back. They take Phillips off the floor, but then they go Mitchell Porter, and then they do a little bit of the haggling towards the end of the half. But they, at the end of the half, they kind of sputter. They miss some free throws. Ant has a turnover. Notre Dame goes on a little 5-0 spurt, and you think, okay, let's get the lineup back out here that got us that lead, that, really made them uncomfortable, that really made them bleed possessions, that really got us those kinds of secondary break opportunities that were allowing us to score easy baskets so we weren't having to play against a team that plays basically a pack line and sinks into gaps. What do? They go back to a lineup where Notre Dame can easily shrink the floor, where you've got a big parked around the restricted area. You don't have shooting on the floor to even theoretically space out because you put Honor Batang out there to start the second half. And Honor's shown flashes of improved shooting, but he's not a shooter. So you've basically got 4 non-shooters on the floor against a team that that just by default wants to shrink the floor. That's
right.
already cut your lead down. Like, it's just, I don't understand what the rotation management is there to make that play. You've just watched a lineup thrive and give you a lead, and to just completely revert away from that doesn't seem like good game management. And kind of the same thing here. I mean, they fell behind 7-2 against against Kansas with the jumbos on the floor. They immediately put Cruz and Barrett in at 15:48 and go on a 9-2 run. Why not just start the game that way? Like what? They stick with it again. Then they go back into the second half when they make their cut. They don't play Sebastian Mack for the first 25 minutes, a guy who can theoretically get downhill and apply rim pressure. As soon as they put Mack, Cruz, Porter, and Northweather on the floor, it's an 11-4 run. As soon as you get guys on the floor that, two bigs, that want a space, that can pull out to the perimeter, that you kind of have to respect and can pull guys away from the midline, they go on a run. I don't understand how you can't look at these two halves, these little spurts that have happened in both these games, and conclude, yep, we still got to start with the jumbo lineup. We still have to put ourselves in a 7 to 8 point hole over the course of two halves that we have to dig out of. It just doesn't seem like good rotation management. And I don't know what it's in service of. I don't know what objective it's trying to, achieve. Even in non-conference games, it's only worked in 3, I think, non-conference games against teams that were sub 320 in average height and don't rebound anyway. Like, where was the sample that said, yes, this can translate? I just don't see it. And I don't understand what the persistence is with it, other than, maybe if we make some tweaks or we make some schematic changes, we can make it work. But there's 10 games of data, and if you talk to, like, guys like Ken Palm or Evan Meyer or anyone else, I'll tell you, after 10 games, your analytic profile kind of is what you are. It starts to become set in stone. So there's enough sample of possessions here to say, against teams with a pulse, this probably doesn't work. And to persist with it's probably not a good idea. We'll see if that changes on Thursday, but yeah.
So, for anybody watching who hasn't read your piece on Sebastian Mack, we are still, like, Sebastian Mack is no doubt struggled, to be consistently effective so far this year. But I would encourage anybody, if you haven't already, to read Matt's piece. Mainly because I like the fact you used the rudimentary screenshots that I grabbed. But, like, these are 2 screenshots that are within the piece. We're talking about, like, the level of spacing that happens when you have, you have essentially up here at the top, and you can see my cursor for watching us on YouTube. You got Anthony Robinson with the ball, Jake Cruz right here, Mark Mitchell over here is Honor Boateng, and then we've got Luke Northweather. There's not a single foot for a defender in the paint. And then when you bring in Phillips, like, this is what happens. Because he doesn't really leave the paint. He'll occasionally kind of hang out in the dunker spot. He'll, if he has to go, set up at, in a horn set or something like that, he'll be at the elbow. But the guy hangs around the rim a lot. And so here you have, again, you've got Ant and Mark. Now you've got Javon. This is Sebastian Mack. And here's, Sean. And he's basically planted his defender right in front of the rim while Ant and Mark are trying to run a ball screen at the top of the key. You can see on the opposite side of the floor, like, Javon has enough shooting credibility to pull the defender away. Mack, like, his defender's open because he knows Mack isn't a huge threat to shoot. But if Ant tries to turn the corner, like, there's nowhere to go here. Versus, again, like, this is what you're looking at. Ant turns the corner. Like, the only way, like, he's going to be able to be stopped is with some severe help side of, Boateng's guy dropping in and around the rim, or Luke's guy stepping in, and then you have a free kick to the corner if Luke's guy steps in. So, like, it's just stuff like this that, and I don't want to make this all about, like, Sean Phillips, because I don't necessarily think it's just Sean Phillips, but I think a good portion of this is Sean Phillips, because, like, he doesn't really give you much offensively. Missouri's offense at its best is not when it's throwing the ball into the post and letting a guy make a post move for a jump hook. The offense is best served when like you have Jacob Cruz on the floor who can space and hit threes, and you have Mark Mitchell attacking the rim. And it's hard for Mark Mitchell to attack the rim when there's a post defender standing right in front of the rim.
Yeah, I mean, this is the best way to think about it. Is Missouri was, I think, above the 90th percentile last year in pick and roll efficiency for scoring, which meant shots taken out of pick and roll, their efficiency was top 10% in the country. It has dropped to the 18th percentile through 10 games. That is ghastly. And right now, it's if you were to like look at just post up efficiency, a post up touch right now for Missouri is worth 0.968 points per possession. That ranks in the 76th percentile nationally. You'd think, oh, that's actually pretty good, right? An average rim attempt is worth 1.1 points per possession. That's 10 or 15% below what a typical rim possession would be. And if you were to look at what Ant and Sebastian Mack averaged last year's pick and roll scores, it was 1.1 points per possession. A Sean Phillips post touch is 10 to 15% worse than an Ant Robinson or Sebastian Mack or Honor Batang drive out of a ball screen. So when you prioritize putting a man in the dunker spot, rolling a big to post up touches, what you are doing is you are saying we are going to be okay accepting 10 to 15% less efficiency by opting for this as a form of offense. And if you even go even deeper, which I've done today, like the most common post up touch for Sean Phillips is basically a quick punch play, which is Missouri comes down, runs maybe a quick action, but it's basically just trying to get a passing angle to dump the ball to him on the block. Those touches are worth 0.833 points. That is less than a contested pull-up jumper in the mid-range, which is considered the worst shot in basketball.
And I like in a small defense of Sean Phillips, like this is why you don't see a lot of posting up anymore because
it's inefficient.
It's inefficient across the board. Like this is a commonality in basketball that that getting a you want to say like whether it's a punch play or whatever, just getting a post up for a big with his back to the basket 8-10 feet out, and for him to make a move is inefficient basketball at this point. And why like Gates has had really efficient offenses to this point is they haven't had a traditional big to throw and get post touches to, and maybe the closest was Kobe Brown in year one, but Kobe was setting up more in the mid and high post and attacking the same way that Mark Mitchell does. Like they're not getting the ball in the block with their back to the basket. They're getting the ball at the elbow and facing up, and that's a very different play.
Yeah, Kobe would get the ball in the mid post or at the logo spot on the wing, attack a smaller defender, and back them in. So it was like a guard who was probably giving up 3 or 4 inches and 30 pounds to him. It's not throwing the ball into Sean against another 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guy who's established post position and can play vertically. So it's inefficient offense. And I think the other thing about it is too, and Watkins will have more on this. He's kind of looking in deeper at the jumbo lineups for a verdict. You just put another guy in cutting lanes, in driving lanes. It's Missouri's been really good over the past couple years when they can run angle cuts from the weak side. And, against an overplay, that's just a diagonal cut from the opposite wing when somebody overplays them. Guess who's waiting around the rim now? Sean. Missouri used to be really good when they could, overload one side of the floor, lift a low help defender, and open up the baseline, and a cutter could cut along the baseline. That's what Demoy Hodge was great at doing. Now there's a big there, and there's a rim protector there. When you have guys turn the corner and drive into gaps, into those double gaps out of the slot, there's a defender there now. So there's another body there. And at times, the other thing that I think will drive Watkins nuts is You don't see Phillips adjust his position to seal off his man, to basically set a butt screen and wall off his defender to allow a clean driving angle to the rim. Just kind of hangs out in that dunker spot and waits to see if there'll be a drop off. So it's not creating, and it's one, it's congesting space. There's not shooting on the floor. And when there are guys that are trying to, swerve their way through traffic, ultimately they're running into a rim protector. So it's not making offense better at this point. Now, will they change it? Will they move away from it? We'll see, but there's just a lot of evidence in data and in video and just even in margins that tell us that it's not working. And to, even if they can make adjustments to make it work, is it still the best form of offense for this roster? I don't think it is.
Well, and on top of that, like it's a 1 year rental situation. Like look, like let's just sub out Sean and sub in Javon. Like if they were running the same type of offense, but trying to get Javon going on the block, we'd all be like, why? Like why are you doing that? Like you have Mark Mitchell to run offense through. You have Anthony Robinson to run offense through. Let's get kickouts, on drives by Seb and Ant to Jacob Cruz. Like let's get that type of offense. That's going to be way more efficient offense than running post ups for a guy who's in his first year in your program. Like you've spent all this time developing guys who've been here for years, and you're basically like putting aside what has worked for the last, 2 of the last 3 years, in favor of a guy that you're bringing in for 1 year. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think I'm at the point where like I get really, really frustrated watching Missouri play with these bigger lineups, and in particular with Sean on the floor, because I just don't think he helps you. Like I don't think he does. I don't think he plays very hard, for one, and like like you listen to this podcast long enough, I don't often like to like attack someone's effort and stuff like that, because you don't always know guys. I don't go to practices, or haven't been to a practice this year, so I haven't seen Sean in person. I don't know what it looks like in practice. Maybe it's different in practice, but I see the games and I don't know what he's doing that makes you a better basketball team. There are things that I see from other guys, and I'm like, okay, like that's encouraging. He's a wonderful athlete, and he dunks the hell out of the ball. But like you need a basketball player out there. You need somebody who like can set screens and somebody who can free up other guys. And it feels like everything is very boggy right now.
I think we talked about this a couple of years ago, and I think I caught flack back then when I brought it up because it was viewed as a direct comparison when it really wasn't. Basketball in many ways is a habitat, it's an ecosystem, it's all those kinds of things where I think we look at things sometimes as a discrete player's skill set versus another player's skill set, and we say this player is better than that player, and that can be true. But I think the one thing, and the reason why I spend so much time with lineups, is you have to understand how skill sets mix, how things sort of balance each other. You have to understand within the context of what kind of sets they're trying to run. And so Sean Phillips, if you were to just separate him and Luke Northweather, you would say, give me Sean Phillips. Bigger, longer, a little bit more mobile side to side, definitely has more vertical pop. If we were just judging prospects, you would say, give me Sean Phillips. The difference is with Luke is it's what, and I think you said this right, it's what Luke doesn't do during the course of a possession that matters. Watch how often Luke will make extra passes on ball reversals. Watch what happens sometimes when he rolls, when he will make one, he will set a good screen, slip out of it, catch on a short roll, and even if he skips it and there's not a shot on the other end, he's now put the defense in rotation. So if there's another pass, there's a gap to drive. That's a good play. It's not going to get him a stat. It's not going to put him, it's not going to be a highlight reel play, but that ability to recognize the defense is overloaded, I need to skip it, and then we can move it is big. He's really good about anchoring around the back line. He will not block a ton of shots, but watch how often he rotates to the right spot, gets vertical, jumps, and stays vertical to at least change the angle for guys who are having to attempt tough runners and floaters. Not going to get a block, not going to get credit with, even a deflection. But that's a good defensive play. He's on time, he's where he's supposed to be, and he's vertical. You know, I compared to, I'll get back to the example I was going to give. It was Drew Buggs versus Xavier Pinson. Everyone said Xavier Pinson's this great guy. He's got a great handle. He can go score. He can get a bucket out of nothing. Missouri's net rating was worse with Xavier Pinson on the floor in normal time than Drew Buggs. And everyone kept saying, Drew Buggs isn't anywhere close to the player. You know what Drew Buggs did really, really well? Drew Buggs was reliable in the shell defensively. He was where he was supposed to be in rotations. He rarely ever gave up open shots. He rarely ever got completely destroyed in blow-bys. There were sometimes in isolations where he'd get beat, but if he was rotating to a spot up, he was usually pretty good. Offensively, he was just good about moving the ball. He'd just get the ball where it needed to go, and because he wasn't using a touch and he wasn't using a shot, that was another touch that was going to, Drew Smith, Mark Smith, young Kobe Brown. That ball was moving to somebody who was more productive than he was. And that's kind of what happens with Luke Northweather. Luke's only got 10% usage, but Missouri is better with him on the floor. And his personal net rating is actually better than Sean's because when does he shoot it? It's an open corner three or an open wing three.
Yeah.
Or it's a cut to the rim from the baseline side. He's not trying to do anything else. He understands what's a good shot for him. He understands when to move the ball around. Is he going to be the same kind of player that, Sean Phillips is just as an athlete? No, but the decisions that he makes on the floor, the understanding of when to shoot is really good. And the ball goes to other places that can be productive. That's a Jacob Cruz shot. It's a good outlet pass that lets Seb attack an early clock. It's setting a really good screen that lets Ant turn the corner. It's doing those types of things that make the offense hum better. So when people talk about, well, they just need to get more shooting on the floor, yeah, that would help. But getting good spacing, getting good guys who are understanding, what's a good screen, what's a good pass, what the right shot is can help just as much. So I think that's probably my frustration as well with this lineup is you're taking your best player and putting him in a spot that that's not his natural spot. You're taking your best shooter off the floor. You're making spacing tighter, but you're just not having a team that understands how to move and play together and create the best shot each time down. And I don't know why a staff that's been really good over the last 3 years, for the most part, figuring out what its best player does really well, is leaning away from that. And I think that's where I get sort of caught up is they've every year, even in the 0-14 year, 0-18 year, they figured out what Sean East did really well and they leaned on it. I don't know what the objective is here and how it's enhancing what their best players do. It just seems like it's creating more headaches for them.
Well, and then on top of that, like the guys who are struggling right now are guys who are normally attacking the rim, and yet like Mark doesn't appear to be struggling, but Mark struggled to score efficiently against Kansas. Like he had his first game this year of sub 100 efficiency rating. Ant has struggled, Seb has struggled, and it's a lot harder to finish around the rim. Attack, draw fouls, all those things, when a guy doesn't feel he has to foul you because there's a 6'9", 6'10" post guy waiting to block your shot as a second line of defense, just waiting. And I think that that's the part. And then I feel like there's a little bit of a sense of urgency with this pod, and a lot of that comes from the fact that
there's not a lot of time to pivot.
Well, right, like the month of November was spent playing bye games at Mizzou Arena against teams that you're going to beat, even if you don't play well. Missouri really played poorly against Emo and still won. They didn't play great against a few of those other teams and won by 20. So they didn't give themselves a whole lot of opportunities early to figure this out. And now you're down to the point where you have 3 remaining non-conference games. You have 2 more bye games against Alabama State, which is Thursday. And then Sunday, is that right? Is
Yeah,
Bethune Cookman,
yeah,
and then you basically have a week off, and then you play Illinois, um,
it looks
and
great.
then that's it, and then you're done for the non-conference. So you have one more quad one opportunity before you hit conference play. And oh, by the way, the SEC has not been very good. And so the number of quad one opportunities you're going to have in the SEC is going to amount to what, like three-quarters of your road games now,
Yeah,
as opposed to
there's
last year
probably
when it
three or
was
four
all your
less
road
quad one.
games, and it was almost all your home games and all your road games. You were getting like 15 quad one opportunities in the SEC, and that's just not going to be the case this year. So your ability to impress the NCAA tournament committee based upon scheduling nobody in November, now being over 2 in your very likely quad one opportunities. I'm guessing the way Notre Dame is, they look like they're playing a
They'll
little better.
probably
So
climb into quad
yeah,
one.
yeah, they'll probably stay in that quad one level. But yeah, so you're 0 for 2 in your quad one of twos. You got one left against Illinois, and then like you're just hoping that you can beat
Yeah,
Florida, I guess.
I mean, this is where I would come down. They've already probably lost 3 to 4 quad one ops at this point off the schedule. Maybe it rallies and they've only lose 2 or 3, but that's still the kind of wiggle room that you need when you didn't schedule that many in non-con. That was your buffer right there. Was the SEC strength was giving you an extra 2 or 3 games that you didn't have in non-con. The other thing about it is, Watkins and I, obviously, if anyone listens to this, watches it, consumes with anything we produce, thank you for that and for putting up with us. But we're wonky, but we have a pretty simple rule that can work for NCAA tournament resumes. 20-10-5. You win 20 games, you win 10 in the SEC, and you win 5 quad ones. You're probably going to make the tournament. I think last time I checked, about 80% of the time. 20-10-5, that's your rule. Well, Missouri might exit non con with 10 wins. That's good. 0 quad ones. So that means they've got to go at least 10-8 with 5 quad one wins in SEC play to give themselves a resume that would be solidly in a time when quad one supply is dipping. That's not good. The other problem here is because Missouri scheduled so gingerly in non-con, if they go 8-10 or 9-9 in a weaker SEC, and the committee looks at their resume, what have they done to teams like Texas A&M a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Left them out. They'll say, "What is this? Good job. You picked up 3 quad one wins and a couple of quad twos, but you got to 9 wins and you didn't schedule anybody in non-con." The worst part is now the worst part about the Kansas loss too is that's a 20-point loss in a quad one on a neutral. If they get hammered by Illinois, that's not going to look great in the non-con because they're like, you didn't play anybody in non-con, and the 2 of the 3 teams you did play that had a pulse beat the crap out of you. They're going to look at the margins and be like, okay. So I think what they've done here is potentially, one, they've only left themselves 3 games to try and experiment. They've got a lot of dead time over the month of December with finals and the holidays. So maybe they can get in the gym when guys get back and they can work through some stuff. But congrats. 2 of those games are this week, and then the one game where you might be able, after you get that layoff, is Illinois and then Florida. So if the incentive to pivot now is you have to, because if you get too deep into SEC play at 0-2, 0-3, and you don't have a quad one win, it's 15 games where you've got to find 5 quad ones, and that's really really hard if you've played the way this team has. So again, if it sounds like people say, "Oh, you shouldn't panic. There's still time left." It's if you look at the data, if you look at what the film is saying, if you kind of look at the way things have unfolded around Missouri, they can fix it. They can make some lineup changes. They can eat some growing pains with it. But there's gonna, I think, have to be some realizations that come pretty quick. And if they persist, maybe it all works out. Maybe this looks alarmist 3 months from now. But if it is 3 months from now and they're sitting at home after being the third or fourth team out, you're going to look back at this week and say, did they really set out what they needed to do? And did they really, you know, go into this and use the non-con in a way that was productive? Right now, it's on an arc where it's probably the answer is probably going to be no.
Yeah.
And so we'll see what they can do. We'll see how they play this week. I don't really, they should have enough talent to beat Alabama State. Bethune Cookman's been feisty out of the MEAC, but that should be a game they win. Really, the thing now
They're
is,
still an 18-point favorite in that game. I think Bethune Cookman, they've taken some paychecks,
yeah,
but they had the big sort of start against Auburn, and
Auburn,
they kind of hit the skids a little bit. They got blown out at Miami, got blown out by Indiana.
yeah,
They lost to Stony Brook, Jacksonville. Like that's still a game. Like they're better than some of the other teams that like they just beat South Carolina State by 21 points.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're a better basketball team than some of the other Q4s that we played, and so is Alabama State. Alabama State, won their
Won the
conference
SWAC
last year. Yeah, and well coached team. That's Madlock, right?
Yeah,
Tony Madlock, yeah.
Tony Madlock.
Um, good coach, long time assistant, a lot of
I will
different
miss it.
places, and has really done a nice job at Alabama State. So, two pretty well coached teams coming in, and then you get Illinois. Illinois hasn't been as consistent as I think a lot of people kind of were hoping from them, but they're
Yeah,
still 11th in KenPom. They've got wins over Tennessee, uh, wins over Texas Tech. Um, and close loss to Alabama and a bit of a slip on the road at Connecticut. But that's the thing. Brad's given him opportunities to get Q1 wins, and they've got more than Missouri. So
I mean, I think
um,
that's the last thing I'll probably hit on here is go look at the teams they played this week. Last week, Notre Dame took 3 close losses early, but they got better each time out. Go look at Kansas. They had to play 3 games without Darren Peterson. They 4 tough games without Darren Peterson. They went 1-3, but they looked feisty in some of them, and they nearly picked off UConn last week, and they put up a fight against them at Fog. Those teams had to figure themselves out. They had to find their identities. Those staffs had to make hard choices and optimize things. And yeah, they took losses, but I think the benefit was there for them because they could figure out lessons. They could find their flaws. They could be exposed a little bit. And Missouri didn't. Missouri's approach is we're going to use these games as an incubator to test our lineups and to figure out and to build chemistry and to build momentum. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get that, but you walk into your first, week of December with no real stress, and there they could point to 3 games where the jumbo lineup looked good and say we feel good about it, even if there was some underlying data that said it wasn't great. There was enough evidence that they could kind of dismiss it. Well, not last week, brutally exposed some flaws there, and again, there's some time to fix it, but why not do it 2 or 3 weeks ago?
yeah,
When
and I think like that's the thing that gets me is you had an opportunity to at least play somebody earlier. Um, and yeah, and I mean we all sat through
Minnesota,
the month of November and watch that. But yeah, Thursday is Alabama State at home. You're a 97% chance to win. Sunday, Bethune Cookman at home, 96% chance to win. So we'll be back next week to kind of talk about those 2 games. And then let's just wrap on this, Matt. What do you want to see in these next 2 games? From Missouri that'll make you think that like, all right, like I'm feeling better about where they are. I mean, other than wins.
are they finding the right spots to deploy Sean Phillips? Like Sean can be useful, I think, in certain lineups. I think when you put him on the floor with another shooter like Cruz, and you put him out there with Mitchell, Mark, I think that can work because you can space Cruz to the opposite side and pull another guy out, and You can open up a side of the floor for Mark because he likes to play on empty sides of the floor, particularly the right side of the floor. He can go to work and he can still try and hit Sean with lobs and dump offs. And, are you able to basically create lineups that make the geometry better of the floor for your guys? And, are they finding ways to stay out of bad lineups, find lineup combinations that are letting Seb get a little bit of a role? I know he seems to be in the doghouse. You need another guy that can apply rim pressure and get to the line because right now that's not happening. And can they figure that out? Can they get some lineups optimized to get some space back, to get some downhill attacks going, and get this offense back to what it looked like when it was humming last year? Because if you can get that going, when you get Jaden Stone back, then I think you can pick some momentum up. But I think there's just got to be some really hard conversations about how they're starting games, what these jumbo lineups are doing, and more specifically what they're not doing, and figuring out just how to optimize some roles. And maybe this week is one where you start tweaking the sub pattern, and then you start, using that week, before bragging rights to, try some other things in practice and figure it out. But I think they've just got to start figuring out lineup optimization, and we've got to start seeing some changes to put guys in spots to succeed. Even if, it looks stilted at times and looks bulky at times, that's better than continuing down a path that's likely not working. So I know that's not like a hyper specific thing, but that's what I'm monitoring, is to see, do they start trying to find ways to change the structure of the floor, the geometry of the floor, and get guys going? What are you going to look for?
I'm really going to be focusing on Ant. Um, I think Ant has at times looked like he's the guy that we thought he was going to be, and but recently, very specifically, like the last 3-4 games, um, he's been struggling, and I think they really need to get him going. Uh, the geometry of this team falls apart pretty quickly if Ant Robinson isn't a quality point guard. Um, and I think right now he's averaging less points than he did last year.
Yeah.
Which when you're going through your non-conference schedule against a bunch of bye games, you want that number to be up. Um, Ant is a talented kid, and the 3-pointer specifically hasn't really been falling. But for me, like, I don't think you see him, navigating, the mid range and the not quite to the rim, but close inside the paint, quite like he did when he was playing really well. And I'd like to see him kind of take steps to sort of be the guy that I thought he could be this year.
Yep.
Like I said, I think the everything works out with this team if, like, what Mark is doing and what Cruz is doing, if you can get Ant going, that gives you that sort of third body to really be an effective offensive scorer. It's going to make up a lot of what they're kind of missing right now. And then like I obviously we've talked enough about the lineups. I've been pretty forthcoming how I feel about certain things and what they're doing. But yeah, I would like to see them, at least, pay a little bit of an homage to what worked last year, and that was when they were smaller, they were more agile, and they had, like, you don't need everybody on the floor to be 6'11". You need guys who will play basketball together, and last year at times they looked like they could be unbeatable, and I'd like to see some glimpse of that, and I think they have to get, not necessarily smaller. I mean, obviously it'd be nice to have Trent Pierce back, but I just not be so married to we have to have all these bigs on the floor, and then let's see what some of these other guys can do.
Yeah, it's great winning the walk from the huddle to the center tip-off area. I'd like to win basketball games too.
As I often say, Matt, like, nobody cares, like, how you win if you win. you don't have to look like you outcoached Bill Self if you beat him, and I think winning for this team is you know is going to come if they make the obvious concessions of things that are clearly wrong right now. And I don't think any coach on the staff is looking at the way things went on Sunday and be like, like we're almost there. It's like, like, buddy, you are not. So, uh, with that said, we're gonna get out of here. Yeah. So back next week, we'll talk about Alabama State. We'll talk about Bethune Cookman and what we saw from those games, and hopefully it's better than what we saw this week. Um, and then we'll kind of keep it going. I do know bragging rights is on a Monday, so we won't go that Monday. We'll probably push to either like a Tuesday or Wednesday that week. But we will keep up going live. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Appreciate the views, the love. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed here, head over to Rock M Plus and subscribe. The verdict will be dropping. The verdict will be all kinds of spicy. If you've ever seen Walkin' Spicy, he was champing at the bit on this one. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and yeah, we'll